You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the nonprofit news outlet exploring solutions for sustainability and equity in water. I'm the host, Travis Loop. Before we dive into the episode, I want to thank you, the audience, for making this platform possible. To support Waterloop, please subscribe on YouTube, rate and review the podcast on Spotify and Apple, follow us on social media at The Waterloop, and sign up for email updates at waterloop.org. Thanks for being part of the conversation. Waterloop. Pittsburgh has emerged from a 2016 lead water crisis to become a national model on how to get the poisonous pipes out of the ground. In this episode, Will Pickering, CEO of Pittsburgh Water, shares how the utility has removed 13,000 lead lines by tapping into digitized records, trenchless pipe replacement, and over $100 million in federal grants and loans, which make this possible at no cost to homeowners. Waterloop. Will, thank you for hosting me here in Pittsburgh. This is one of the communities in the country that's really been looked at for its approach to lead service line replacement. Tell me the history.
Sure. Well, great to have you here in Pittsburgh, Travis, and so proud to showcase the program that we have now. And it's interesting, our history with lead service line replacement and lead in Pittsburgh goes back to 2016. The utility had an exceedance of the lead action level. And as you can imagine, in 2016 was also when Flint was having its issues with lead. And the utility was positioned with a number of challenges, trying to control corrosion through our water treatment, and then also recognizing we have thousands of lead service lines within our water system. And at that point, we didn't know where they were. So a lead action level exceedance requires a replacement of 7%. But we sort of had to scramble and didn't have the records to know where to begin. So we really weren't positioned in that initial exceedance to be able to respond to compliance and respond to community concerns. But it took maybe longer than we would have liked, but we were able to digitize paper records. We were able to develop a program that has evolved into something I think that's really progressive. We're replacing full lead service lines at no direct cost to customers, whether it's public or private. Actually, the location behind us are two privately owned lead service lines we're going to replace at no cost to them. And we've involved our community. This work is super intense. We're here in a neighborhood. We're in people's basements. We know that we have to communicate with them a lot. And then we've been able to get federal funding to do this work, grant funding, which is just so valuable because those are dollars. We don't need to ask of our ratepayers to fund it. We're well over $100 million in investment on our lead service line replacement program to date. We've replaced over 13,000 public lead service lines. Because again, those records are incomplete. We're not quite sure how many more we have left to go, but we know we're well over halfway. And our goal is to get all of the lead out of our system, public or private, on the residential side by 2027.
Incredible. That records issue, that's a big one across all kinds of communities. How did you tackle that? How have you gone about finding the lead?
Yeah, so our first step is, we had some records, but they were essentially on index cards, handwritten, sometimes over 100 years old, amazing penmanship, but essentially stored in shoeboxes with no real rhyme or reason and very difficult to find. You couldn't put them on a map. So we had an intensive effort to take those records and digitize them, put them on a GIS map, made them available to the public and said, hey, here's what we have. We're not sure it's 100% accurate because things have changed over the last 100 years. Maybe service lines have been replaced. But we really made an effort to be transparent. And that got us probably 2/3 of the way there in terms of records, but another third, we had all these unknown sites. We kicked off the program with a very large low-interest loan and grant from Penvest, which is the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's SRF, State Revolving Fund, and that really got the ball rolling. And actually, the utility had not really used SRF funding before then. It was sort of seen as that's a lot of hoops to jump through, Travis. And the savings that we get from the low interest loans through the SRF compared to going to the bond market is in the hundreds of millions of dollars over time that we're saving from that lower interest rate. And then as luck, I guess you could say, had it, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act passed with billions of dollars nationally available for lead service line replacement And so we have been applying for those grants from Penvest since those dollars were available. We're doing our best to get as much here to Pittsburgh, and we've been really successful in doing that. And those grant dollars, as your viewers likely know, I mean, those are dollars I don't have to ask of our ratepayers. So it's a combination of the grant dollars, which is really limited to the lead service line replacement program, and then low interest loans, because sometimes we're replacing also the water main in the street, and we'll use low interest loans for that. So that, that moment of crisis helped us realize the opportunities in federal funding, and we haven't looked back. I often say we're looking under every couch cushion for free money for us to do this really essential work.
Yeah. And as you said, you're over halfway, right? So you got a good bit more work to do. How do you envision continuing to fund, trying to still tap into those same pools, or how's that look?
Yeah, we think we have about another year where these grant funds are going to be on the table. And again, really just lucky that we had a program ready to go to begin applying for those funds. And I know that's not the same in other cities across the country. So that really made us a good candidate for those grants. So we want to try to get every grant dollar we can. And then if not, we're going to try to use either the low interest loans or just ratepayer generated funding. And it is clear when I go out and talk to the community, this is where they want their ratepayer dollars invested, just because it hits home, so important to public health. There's that moment of crisis in the 2016, 2017 period, and we're so close to getting the job done. I think the community really believes that we should do it.
Yeah. You mentioned community. I brought up the kind of outreach and comms in 2016. Talk a little bit more about what that looks like now, how you kind of are communicating with the community of Pittsburgh about this. You are a longtime communications person yourself. What's it look like these days?
Yeah, so we've really evolved from the tense public meeting with all of the talk of the crisis, and I mentioned we tried to be as transparent as possible, and over time through the relationships we've built, I think through that transparency, we have a core set of community groups that are actually our advisors. So we have what's called a community-led response advisory committee. That when we're changing policies about how we do the work and we update them on funding, we go to them on a quarterly basis and present to them our plan. And some of these individuals are the ones that came to our board meeting and really were challenging us at the start. And now, they'll join us at public events to be able to champion and herald the progress we're making and try to encourage other communities that do what we've done. So it's been years-long efforts that didn't happen overnight to win back that trust. But I think so much of that was just our ability to say, hey, yeah, we have a lot of work to do. And here are some of the challenges why we maybe can't do it tomorrow, but we're committed to doing it. And now 5+ years into the program, we've really demonstrated that, what we committed to, we're going to deliver upon. And so we've been able to win over those members of the community.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the technical side, if you will, how you're actually replacing the lead service lines. What's the approach that you're taking here at these properties?
Yeah, so here we are in the Mount Washington neighborhood in the city of Pittsburgh. We have 91 neighborhoods, believe it or not, for a city of 300,000 people, most of them with unique identities. I'm proud to say this is my neighborhood, very hilly though, and we have retaining walls and we have some, every block is sort of a unique challenge that we're asking our contractors to be able to navigate to get these lead service lines out of the system. And where the service line begins is at the main, which is, best case scenario, but not always in the middle of the street. Then it goes to the curb, and that's what we call the public side. And there's a valve in the curb called the curb stop that kind of delineates that ownership. And then from the curb into the home, and typically it's in the basement here in Pittsburgh, is the private side. And what we are, as I mentioned, we're committed to replacing any lead that we may find from that main into the home. So we have contractors, as you can see here today, helping us with this work. And what we try to do is create as little disruption as possible, because there's landscaping, there's stairs, there's things that we don't want to dig up because that's disruptive and expensive. And so what our contractors are able to do most of the time is actually thread a new copper line in from the basement out to the street that we can reconnect to the main. We call it pooling. Still requires a couple holes to be excavated, but much less disruptive than having to take a trench all the way into the home. And it's been really helpful for us, efficient. We can bang out a few of these in a day, which is really, that efficiency is important when we're trying to do as much as we're aiming to do here.
Yeah. Lastly, Why do you think people have looked at Pittsburgh as a bit of a model for taking on lead lines? And what lessons have you been able to share with other communities across the country?
Yeah, I'd like to think, people get excited about how we were able to take a moment of crisis and evolve and turn it on its head.
Mm.
I think that was really a reflecting point for the organization. We had to step up in so many different ways that has been beneficial, not just limited to the lead service line
Mm.
replacement program, but we have been extremely progressive in how we've approached it. And not to say we had some stumbling blocks, especially at the beginning. But the fact that we're committed to doing full line replacement at no direct cost to customers, we've been able to do it at scale, and we've invested a lot in that communication piece of it.
Mm.
We have what are called lead help liaisons
Mm.
that meet with property owners along with our contractors to tell them about the construction process because we're going to be in their homes. We're asking them to take some time off of work to allow us that access. And so we want to get it right. We want to make sure that they agreed to do the work. We need to get them to sign an agreement. And so we've had a really intensive and intentional effort on the public outreach and public engagement. And that is one of the areas that when we talk to other cities, they kind of say, oh, yeah, we probably do need more than what we have now, which is, sort of a call center to be able to do this work, or essentially leaving it to contractors to knock on a door and try to explain it. So we've been really hands-on in that respect. And then, our ability to use the grant funds is one thing that I think we've inspired a lot in our industry to try to take advantage of those dollars while they were available, especially with the IIJA. We have no secrets. We meet with dozens of utilities and share our methods with them. And that has really motivated some to compete with us for those SRF funds and grant funds, which we welcome because it's the right thing to do for our industry. It's the right thing to do for the publics we serve. So I think that, the combination of that and our commitment to really have an ambitious goal, even prior to the regulations, to get it all done. As I said, our goal is to get all of the lead out by 2027. So maybe we can have you back here in Pittsburgh to celebrate that last residential lead service line that we get out of our system.
Michelle Naccarati of Women for a Healthy Environment highlights the role of community advocacy with workshops and partnerships rebuilding trust. Targeting full replacement by 2027, Pittsburgh's approach shows how determination and collaboration can ensure safe drinking water. What was your relationship with the utility and the city? How did you start to advocate and interact with them?
So the relationship with the utility at first wasn't great, to be honest with you. There was a lot of change in leadership. And because of that change in leadership, there was a real lack of consistency in terms of how they were approaching the situation. And so, we were advocates and activists saying, you've got to do a better job and coordinate your work. So then shortly after we began our filter distribution, then the city and the utility worked together to begin a filter distribution program, brought us into the fold and said, okay, how should we do this? What would be our best approach? And we said, let's work with the communities that have most vulnerability out of the gate, and we'll evolve from there.
And then what has been your role in helping to identify, where the help should go?
Yeah. So we wore several different hats throughout the process. We were community advocates and we were educating community about the needs. That evolved to really working on the mayor's blue ribbon panel to look at and assess a whole overview of the utility at that time, the water authority in terms of the operations. And there was a question, should it stay public or should it go and become privatized? So after this long, about 18-month process, we said, the utility really needs to remain public, but it needs some more structure to it. And so we worked through that and then we evolved to a nominating committee that really looked at the board structure of, at that time, PWSA, now Pittsburgh Water. And then that evolved to serving on what's known as their CLEAR Act. It's the Community Lead Response Advisory Committee, and really playing an integral role in that committee.
From a nationwide perspective, Pittsburgh has evolved to be a bit of a positive model for how to tackle lead lines. Yes, there was that choppy beginning, but everyone feels like, okay, something good has happened here as far as the process and the momentum.
Yep.
What's your take on that?
I agree with that. So, Will Pickering had evolved through this entire time of a critical lead issue that needed a response. And so with his leadership moving forward, we were able to really begin a nice working relationship where he really wanted to hear from the residents and the community and nonprofits to understand what's working and what isn't. And if it's not working, we'll change it. So much that then I said to Will, you need to actually, you've got a lot of talent here at Pittsburgh Water and you need to help others. And so he and I laugh because I continue to say to him, take that technical expertise you have then and now give it to other water systems across the region that are just starting out this process that you have been doing now for many years.
So now that the process is going well, could you build out a little bit on your role in this ongoing effort? How you, both the two sides, how do you continue advocating to the utility and the city, working with them? And then the other side, how do you continue, your education and outreach to the community?
Sure. So working with Pittsburgh Water now, serving on their lead advisory committee, what we did was really looked at how to launch the lead service line replacement program. So sitting around a table of a dozen or so individuals, all representing different aspects of community, and defining what that process looked like, because they only had so much money. And it's a very, we've been doing this for a long time now, nearly 14,000 lead service lines. And so, what did that look like out of the gate? Well, we had to take a lot of data and look at the most vulnerable communities, neighborhoods first, including those that had children with the highest amounts of elevated blood lead levels, which is lead poisoning. And so that really helped us define both that, the number of children, as well as women of childbearing age and low income, to really start that process and continue that then through the various years. So that all came from the lead advisory committee that I serve on. In terms of the work that happens today, we still hold workshops all around the region. And those workshops, all focus on these environmental exposures. And lead is a primary one that we still have in southwestern PA. We have aging infrastructure. Our housing stock is the fourth oldest in the country. Wow. And so not only water, but we have soil contamination, paint and dust in homes with all of this lead exposure. So it's really how do we educate communities about all of these exposures and then what they can do and empower them then to really make a difference and lower that lead exposure risk.
Yeah, since you work so closely with the community, how are people feeling nowadays? What would you say their general education level is about lead pipes, and how are they feeling about the process that's underway?
The Pittsburgh Water story has been an interesting story throughout many, many years now. And, it's really been a community-wide engagement. So city council members became involved early in the process, communicating this lead service line project to their residents that they serve. Churches were actually providing some space, hosting space as well, and libraries. So it really has been a community-wide event or focus. And so that really has helped the residents come together to understand this process and to want to participate in the process because they all have to sign an agreement to agree to allowing this work to happen.
And a reflection of the, I think, support now in the community for the utility.
I really see that the support is now there. I think that the other aspect of it is that there's a trust factor that is there now that hadn't been there before. And so because the utility had been so forthcoming, because they too have held workshops alongside us and other community groups, they have been responsive with their website and the transparency and have really made that interactive and accessible to the residents, that the trust factor has really increased. And now the residents really are comfortable with the utility and believe what they say.
Waterloop. Thanks for listening. If you want to support Waterloop's ongoing exploration of water solutions, subscribe on YouTube, rate and review the podcast on Spotify and Apple, follow us on social media at The Waterloop, and sign up for email updates at waterloop.org. Until next time, be water, my friends.
You're in the Waterloop.